I tell you what I am concerned about, and that is if Congress and the judiciary doesn't do something soon about the FBI and the Justice Department, we are on our way to becoming a fascist nation and a police state. Our founding fathers never intended us to have a national police force who could just decide to go after people they didn't like. And that's what RICO and mail fraud and some of these other statutes have been used for. Something's got to be done to change that around, or we will not be a free people much longer.
Vic, it's good to see you.
Hey, Jonathan, it's good to see you, man.
I like that you dressed up for this occasion. It's like each week you come to us, you're a little bit different. The beard.
A little bit different. Yeah, I put on my uniform today, my black T-shirt and black sport coat.
Silent profiling.
This is the first time I've had on a sports jacket or a suit jacket in 2.5 months.
Is that how long this has been going on?
I guess. I'm losing track of the days. Totally losing track of the days, man. I saw you this week, though. I came to the office, and you were in your office, and I put on my mask and stood there at your door and talked with you for a little while.
You did.
Yeah. And it was a regulation mask. It wasn't my Darth Vader mask this time, or my White Walker mask. I put that White Walker mask on Facebook. Got a lot of comments. I figured out there are a lot of people who don't know what a White Walker is, though.
Well, really?
Yeah, they just never watched Game of Thrones, and they're proud of it.
They're proud of it.
Yeah.
Each his own.
Well, you know, after watching the last episode, I almost wish I could say I never watched Game of Thrones, but I did enjoy it. It had some great characters, some great scenes, but like so many good shows like that series, they dropped the ball at the end. Like, too many loose ends, dudes. Let's tie up the loose ends. That's what we need to do with our criminal justice system, too, is tie up the loose ends.
Right.
We're always talking about that. Speaking of some of the loose ends, I got some news.
Feed me.
There's a case coming before the Supreme Court. They voted, a few weeks ago to hear these cases,
okay,
or at least to consider hearing them. All these documents are going to be on their big old table there in their conference room. Going to be enough documents maybe to break the table. But you remember, Jonathan, we were talking about how far the courts have gone on giving policemen and law enforcement officers blanket immunity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've seen it.
For anything.
Personally handled. Oh, yeah. They're slippery, folks.
Slippery. We've been talking about that. And we even talked about how William Barr, who's presently our Attorney General, how he was lobbying the courts to give police immunity even if they kill somebody who's not resisting, even if they kill somebody for no reason. Give them immunity. Don't even prosecute them. Well, fortunately, that hasn't come about yet. And there have been so many courts around the states, all 50 states, just handing out this blanket immunity to policemen who commit all kinds of atrocities.
Right.
And they've been appealing these cases, the person whose rights were violated. They've been appealing them up through the courts, and the Supreme Court so far has just been sitting on it. And then suddenly they picked 11 of them that they plan to look at.
Cool.
Yeah. This is an article from the Washington Post.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Let's hope they do something, Vic.
I hope so.
Today, what would you personally like to see? What would be the right step to back down from that immunity?
I usually don't like to see us take steps backwards.
Right.
But in this situation, we need to take a giant step backwards, all the way back to, I think it was 1877.
Woo.
Yeah. Congress passed a law then called the KKK Act, the Ku Klux Klan Act. And the basis of it, and there were a lot of policemen back then involved with the KKK.
Right.
In some states, they still are.
Sure.
But the basis of it was that if you were injured, if you were harmed by a police officer without cause, if he was not within his rights, like if you were resisting or something like that, but if you were harmed by law enforcement, you had a right to bring suit and be compensated and be made whole.
Right.
But since 1877, the courts have been chipping away at that doctrine. Congress never changed the law. It's still the law. The courts have been changing these laws so that you just can't sue a cop anymore, no matter what he does. Well, the Supreme Court has taken up these 11 cases involving plaintiffs seeking redress for violations of their civil rights. In 10 cases, all but one, the government defendants were law enforcement officers. But the courts granted the defendants qualified immunity simply because they were police. The Supreme Court's consideration of this avalanche of petitions suggests that the court is reconsidering its mistake in creating qualified immunity in the first place. This doctrine has essentially nullified accountability for law enforcement and other government officers, even in cases where violation of constitutional rights are indisputable. Right. So we're hoping, since they saved up all 11, that they're not going to come out and just give the cops carte blanche and say, no, you go out and you keep doing these things. It's okay. We hope they're really going to look at it. In one situation, a police officer, eager to administer an alcohol breath test to a man on misdemeanor probation. So there's a guy on probation, and this cop just wants to make him take a breath test. Well, there's only one problem, is that this guy's in his house asleep. So this officer parked his parole car in front of the man's house with its siren roaring for over an hour. He covered the house's security cameras with tape and repeatedly circled the house, knocking on windows. Can you imagine that?
So ridiculous.
Until the guy came out, and then the cop threw him down and made him give a breath test. A lower court held that this warrantless invasion violated the Fourth Amendment, but you got immunity. We don't see any clearly established law that forbade his behavior. Give me a break, Jonathan. What if you or I did that?
It's pretty common sense. You don't do that.
You don't do that. I want you to blow in this breath machine. So I'm going to park in front of your house and
the neighborhood.
Run my siren and maybe even play Nancy Sinatra at you.
Oh, there you go.
That's one of their tricks, right?
It's so stupid,
isn't it?
You have nothing to do. Go solve a murder. Go solve crimes.
Here's another one. A court granted immunity to officers who, make sure I'm reading this right. The court granted immunity to officers who stole $225,000 in cash and rare coins while executing a search warrant. And this guy sues them, and the court goes, no, sorry, they've got immunity. The court granted these guys immunity to a deputy sheriff who, while repeatedly attempting, this is a different case. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. So anyway, the courts granted immunity to this guy who, during a search warrant, stole $225,000. Now, how can that be right?
That's amazing. Wow.
But they gave him immunity. Well, it's on the desk of the Supreme Court of the United States right now. In another case, a sheriff's deputy who was repeatedly attempting to shoot a pet dog that posed no threat. And we've talked before about the deep state.
We've talked about how they like to shoot the doggies.
They like to shoot the dogs. But this guy's not a very good shot. He keeps shooting at the dog, but he shot a 10-year-old child who was laying on the ground instead.
Whoa.
Can you believe that? And the court granted immunity to these officers and said, no, they can't sue you for it. Now, there may have been some criminal violations, probably some criminal violations on the guy who stole the $225,000, but you can't sue him in court. Can't get your money back. Can't sue him for killing your kid and trying to kill your dog.
It's just wrong. It's just wrong.
It's wrong.
Few bad apples, man. You know, that's unfortunately what ruins the bunch.
Here's another one. This sounds familiar. This is the case you and I had 10 years ago, and the law ruled against us on it. A court granted immunity to officers who used tasers 9 times and fatally on an unarmed man having a mental health episode.
That's exactly what our case was. I think
that was our case.
Like 10 times though. I think our guy may have had another shot or two.
Yeah, our guy was tased more than 10 times, and there were 4 officers who had him surrounded right here in Waco, Texas, tasing the crap out of him. Tased him until he bounced until he was dead.
Well, those are crazy circumstances, Vic. And
yeah, I know.
It's interesting though, the cases that they picked all involve a slightly different aspect of it. There's a financial aspect, there's a murder aspect to it, because basically those police officers are murdering people, and then they have, you know, it's crazy, man. Well, I'm happy that they took those kinds of cases on, because they all show a little different side of the immunity blanket they try to hide underneath. No kidding. When I argue to a jury and what some of the state's witnesses have been given immunity, I always tell the jury that they have wrapped this witness in the black shroud of immunity, and they try to tell you it's the American flag. Yeah. Seriously. They try to tell you, it's American. We're doing the right thing. This is America. We can use immunity to get somebody to lie because it's America. Well, I sure hope our Supreme Court straightens this out and say, yeah, guys, you're right. This is America. And we're going to go back to the way the law was in 1877, and we're going to let people sue your butts over this kind of stuff. Now, Jonathan, you've worked for me for what, almost 15 years? Correct. So you know how hard it is to get medical records. I mean, we have to jump through hoops. Yeah. And we're talking in the context of, you know, we work personal injury cases, and whenever someone is done treating in their personal injury claim, we have to order all of their medical records so we can send them to the insurance company for them to review them and say how much our client didn't need that procedure or what have you. So that's the context of what you're talking about. And it's very hard to get medical facilities to provide information that we have authorizations to get. You're right. That's right, man. And we have signed authorizations from our client to get their medical records, and sometimes we have trouble getting it. Well, here, a court granted immunity to state investigators who, without notice and without a warrant, entered a doctor's office, pushed him aside, and searched the medical records of 16 patients. And everybody's going, HIPAA, that violates HIPAA. And the court's going, no, they're police. It's okay. You do whatever they want. Have fun. What do you think about that? I think that's pretty crazy, man. At least on the case with the medical records, they had one dissenting judge. And in his dissent, he wrote that qualified immunity amounts to unqualified impunity, letting public officials duck consequences for bad behavior. That's well put. Yeah. And I hope that's the way our Supreme Court is going to look at it on Monday. Now, when I'm saying Monday, so when this airs, that'll be yesterday. Right. Yesterday, because this is going to air on Tuesday. So the Supreme Court's going to be looking at this on Monday. Since 1982, this doctrine has been a major impediment to the protection of constitutional rights because of 3 inappropriate words. Now, I'll tell you what those 3 words are. I was wrong about the date on the KKK Act. It was 1871. It was right after the Civil War.
Congress said that government officials who violate a citizen's constitutional rights, quote, shall, now we know what shall means in the law, shall be liable to the party injured. That's the law, and that is still on the books. But in 1967, the courts began subverting Congress's clear intent by diluting the right to civil remedies. And in 1982, the court almost nullified, and this is the Supreme Court,
Right.
almost nullified the right by holding that the official's conduct must be measured against, and here are those three words, clearly established law. Well, they don't mean that you broke some clearly established penal law. That means, is there already a clearly established case law that this is abusive police conduct or violating a civil right? And so anything that makes it a little bit different, they go, oh, sorry, you didn't touch all the bases. These guys go free. So
I think that's interesting, though, that the first hack at this was in 67, because that was obviously in U.S. history, that was a pretty crazy time. You had the Vietnam War, but you had so much civil unrest and everything. I have no doubt that that's what that was, is a chip to keep the masses and all them hippies in check.
So perversely, Jonathan, this is what it comes down to. The more gross the unconstitutional behavior is, the harder it is to persuade the courts to deny immunity. Wow. It's a stupid legal fiction that just I really, really, really hope they fix.
I do too.
So let's be watching that. Tuesday.
Some good choices Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Yes,
and we'll be talking about it on Tuesday.
I like it. We're in our own little time capsule.
Yeah, because we've talked about that before, the police immunity and what a problem it is. And there's something else we've talked about before, and it's in the news right now. You want to tell us about that?
Ooh, yes, Vic. You found an update to one of the cases we talked about in the past. So back on podcast number 30, which is a little ways back, we covered the Kathleen O'Brien Doyle case, right? And this was a case where a woman was murdered. Otis Toole and Henry were pegged with it. But fast forward, and they find there's a gentleman by the name of Dennis Bowman who actually did the murder. So we covered the fact that they found Dennis Bowman and they charged him with that murder. Well, when we were talking about it, and everything we read was also that he had a stepdaughter, right? That went missing years before. And we're like, man, I bet he's the one who killed her too. Well, guess what? He did kill her. So in February, they found her remains, right? Buried underneath a slab of concrete. And they charged him on, I think it was just this past week, right? They actually charged him with her murder too. So there's a little conclusion to episode 30 in that, we talked about the stepdaughter potentially being also an unfortunate victim of Mr. Bowman, and we're right. So they charged him with that murder too.
Good. You predicted that. You said if they'd just go dig around in the woods or look for any kind of concrete that he's laid or anything he's burned, go through it. They'll find her. And sure enough.
Shame. So it was not Henry and it was not Otis Toole.
Yeah, we kind of already knew that.
Kind of already knew all that.
Yeah, just like we know that he didn't do any of those cases. Maybe 3, counting his mom, and I'm still not sure about those other 2.
I know.
For me, the jury is still out. If we were dealing with somebody besides that Montague County group, I might believe it. For both of those convictions to come out of that Sheriff Conway's little group up there, him and Phil Ryan. Yeah. And I never talked bad about Phil Ryan before until I saw him lying his butt off on Netflix.
How about you?
Yeah. So, Phil Ryan, you got some splaining to do. I wish, since that's a closed case, they would make their entire file available to us so that we could close some of those gaps. Maybe when we get back together, we could do an open records request or freedom of information or whichever is the right one and try to get that file.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see what's in there, Vic. we're both on the fence. I'd look at it totally unbiased.
I wouldn't, but because I think I already know. I'll try to look at it unbiased. I don't want to be like them. You're right. I'll try to look at it unbiased. But man, I got my doubts, especially about Kate Rich. There's so many holes in that Kate Rich. It's pathetic.
That one's kind of funky. I agree with you. Well, what do you want to talk about today, Vic? I know you sent me a ton of news articles.
Yeah. Where were we on the? Oh, and we did find the actual Captain Albert's letter that was printed in the paper. Casey found that for us. We had only had that Xerox copy that had been typed out and mailed to me.
Yeah.
But she found the actual headline, and it is a pretty good sized headline. See if I've got it here. I may have left it in my other office, the kitchen.
Yeah, man.
Oh, here it is. Can you see that? Yeah, flap over Lucas, smears Rangers, and then that's Captain Albert's letter.
Lap.
I woke up to that early one morning, just like I woke up to the Trib endorsing my opponent after I was arrested.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I got some real problems with that newspaper.
Hopefully the old blood will be out, the new blood will come in, and you'll have people who are unbiased and
I hope so.
See things as they are.
I hope so. I do. Where were we on the timeline?
So
we're still in April. Oh my God. I told you April was a long month. Yeah, April 1985 was one of the longest months of my life.
It really teed everything up for the next few years, really for the next portion of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking last time about the connections between deep state and the media and how they were starting to activate. We started talking about Charles Duncan as well last time. This Channel 8, the reporter who is picked by the powers that be to come down to Waco and do this huge news series on you. So let's pick up there.
Okay. Well, we had left off on February. We're still on the 28th. Duncan hasn't quite hit town yet, I don't think. Or has he?
I thought
he was there on the 14th, wasn't he?
Right. He was starting to poke around.
Yeah. I'm glad. Thank you, Alan McCutcheon, for doing this timeline. I wish Alan was still alive so he could work with us some on this.
Yeah.
Damn. So anyway, he was already in town because here on April the 23rd, I have a notation in the timeline. Duncan writes a News 8 memo to Claire requesting reservations. Oh, we went over that. Yeah, reservations at the Ramada Inn. So that was on the 23rd. He got with them on the 24th. And now we're up to the 28th. So 5 days later. The 28th of April, our evidence for this is an Austin American Statesman article by, man, we need some sound effects for this guy.
Yes. Mike Cox.
Mike Cox. Hack for the DPS. Yeah. Only back then, the Austin American Statesman was still paying his salary.
Right.
He wrote an article that said Lucas purportedly wrote a 4-page letter to Clemmy Schroeder saying, no matter what you hear, don't let them tell you what your heart knows is right because I cannot stop these people. I have to do like they want me to. I've been telling you this all along, but for some reason, I can't seem to get through. The letter also purported to state, I want to go back to Georgetown to clear up my cases. Look at the facts. They know they didn't show me any crime scenes. I took them to the crime scenes. Well, we know that's not true.
So he was flipping and flopping again.
He was. And this letter was to Clemmy Schroeder. Well, we know why he did that with Clemmy. Clemmy's the one that had brought him to Jesus, and his value is not as great if he's just a liar as it is if he's a big mass murderer. That's why that crazy preacher Bob Larson was interested in him for his radio show.
Right.
And Clemmy really wanted to be the one that brought Henry to Jesus. She had already written her book. They called me Sister Clemmy.
Right.
And it basically just recounted her meetings with Henry. You can buy that book if you want to probably on Amazon, and see what Sister Clemmy had to say from her point of view at that time. I don't know if there's been a second edition or not, bringing it up to date, but Henry was he was just pulled like a piece of taffy, man, trying to keep Clemmy and Boutwell happy on the other side, but wanting to tell the truth on the other side.
Right.
And we weren't forcing him to do anything. Mike Cox wrote an article about that. And you know what? I never saw that letter. In all the stuff that we subpoenaed, never were able to get that letter. It somehow just disappeared. So I'm not sure that it even said what Mike Cox says it says, because Clemmy couldn't really remember what it said. And Boutwell, he went in with a tape and then gave the tape to Bob Larson.
Right.
And at this time, keep in mind, Henry was still coming off of Thorazine. I mean, Thorazine, it makes you very pliable, makes you subject to suggestion, makes you want to please. And when you're coming off of it, it makes you cry. And that's about where Henry was. He was nervous. He was crying. He was pulled between Clemmy, Boutwell, and the truth. And then here's Mike Cox. He writes, Lucas' count of killing called a lie. And this was published in the Austin Statesman in April, I believe the 28th, the 29th. That's it. Yeah. Schroeder, who has become one of Lucas's closest friends and law enforcement officers from California to Florida on Monday, say they continue to believe Lucas is responsible for dozens of slayings. So Clemmy was at that time still saying, I think Henry killed all these people.
Right.
However, Texas Attorney General Jim Maddox said he had doubts about the handling of the Lucas case. Now, this was early in April. I mean, late in April.
Right.
Maddox was still real strong with me after that. But as it went on, it got to where Jim was showing up a little less.
Right.
And I was out there on a limb by myself, and it was being sawed off, man. I love Jim. Don't get me wrong, man. He stuck up for me, and I couldn't have done this without him. And he even came and testified for me in my pretrial, trying to get Judge Nallen to dismiss the charges, saying he believed that what they were doing to me was retaliatory over my stance on Lucas. It says here by Mike Cox, hack for the DPS, that Schroeder, who has been giving Lucas daily Bible lessons and instructions in painting twice a week, said Monday, he has told me he has killed as many as 10 in one day. He said there are only 4 cases he's confessed to that he's not sure about. Lord, if these aren't my cases, he prayed, reveal it somehow so that the killer will not be out there and make this evil be uprooted. So that's Henry and Clemmy praying together. I'm telling you, this was a rough time. This was a very rough time for me and for my office. It was a rough time for Hugh Ainsworth and the Dallas Times Herald. Times Herald. Don't get them confused. Times Herald was a real newspaper. Morning News has gotten better because they hired some of the old Times Herald reporters after Times Herald went belly up.
It's crazy to see like the psychology though, Vic, of Lucas and Clemmy right now, how he's just so flip-floppy, and I mean it's just creating this entire just fake environment that they live in, just this whole world that doesn't really exist, and they just both get to play in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the word? There's a psychological term for that. A folie à deux. It's French, folie à deux, which means a shared delusion.
Yeah.
And they live in this shared delusion. Lucas said he wasn't worried about Ainsworth hurting his reputation. Can you believe that? Henry Lucas isn't worried about Hugh Ainsworth hurting his reputation.
Remember then they like signed a book deal a little later on. So remember?
But he did. Oh, Lucas?
Yeah, remember Lucas was gonna, or Hugh was gonna do a book on Lucas. Remember they had to discuss the rights and everything, and
Hugh was going to do a book on Lucas. He was, until Boutwell got suspicious of Hugh and wouldn't let him see Henry anymore. Mike Cox was talking about doing a book on Lucas. He may have done it.
I thought he did.
Yeah, I think he did. I think he did that stupid one, Hands of Death, or something. I can't remember. It was really, really stupid. I remember there were several books like this, but I remember in one, there's this narrative of Henry and Becky talking to each other. And, Henry's got his glass eye. And so the paragraph said, and Henry looked at Becky with love in his eye.
Eye.
Eye. Yeah. He said he didn't want to make a mockery out of the Lord, Clemmy Schroeder said. Yeah. So he was really being pulled. And man, it was tough on me because the press was beating my butt every day. I had come out. I had started all this with the grand jury. And then they came after me like crazy. And during that 2 weeks, and this is still during that 2-week recess from the grand jury, right. Whoa, did a lot happen.
Well, and also, I mean, you came out and, and even he had the press conference too, Vic, where he said, I did none of these. Now he's back to going, I did them. So, I mean, for you, it's got to be tough where you put your neck on the line, even for Henry, I mean, putting the deep state craziness aside, but you popped out and said, look at Henry said he didn't do these. All of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, he's back going, I did them all. I need to go clear them up.
Yeah. It was a little quicker in the timeline than that.
Yeah.
After he was off the Thorazine, he got pretty straight.
Yeah.
Even after Boutwell got him back and was twisting his arm trying to get him to confess, business as usual.
Right.
Henry wouldn't do it. He wasn't even taking their milkshakes because he was convinced they had been slipping Thorazine into his milkshakes.
Oh,
I tell you, our psychiatrist looked at his blood work and said there was enough Thorazine in Henry to knock out a horse. I don't know how big a horse, but still, that's a lot of Thorazine.
What was that Parks and Recreation horse? Lil Sebastian.
Lil Sebastian. Lil Sebastian. I love that. Love the song too.
Oh boy.
Listen to this. This is Mike Cox being the mouthpiece here for Boutwell. Boutwell said that investigators have confirmed several cases with physical evidence. Well, we know that's a lie. There was never any physical evidence to connect Henry to anything. Nothing, ever, zero, zip. Boutwell says, there are cases connected with prints, not Bob Prince, Prints, Prints, fingerprints.
Right.
That's a lie. There was never any fingerprints. And one with an eyewitness who had been beaten and robbed and left for dead. Well, who is that? Where is that person? That never happened. They were pulling lie after lie after lie. And before we could prove it was a lie, there were 5 more lies down the road. And the press was eating it up and printing all their lies. And by the time that we could prove it was a lie, it was old news. Right. They weren't interested in our proof. They weren't interested in the real truth. They were only interested in the new allegation.
Oh, boy.
Boutwell says, there are cases where body hair found on a victim has positively been identified as Lucas.
That never happened.
Never happened. And besides that, unless there's a root on that hair and you can get DNA off of it, You can't positively identify a hair as belonging to anybody. You just can't. Not without DNA, and we didn't have DNA science back then.
Boom.
So he's lying about fingerprints. He's lying about eyewitnesses. He's lying about the body hair being found on the victim.
Right.
Cases where the victim's hair has been found in some of his vehicles and positively matched, and some firearms evidence. Well, what the hell is he talking about firearms evidence? And there was never any hair found in any of his vehicles, never any blood found in any of his vehicles that matched any victim.
Right.
Certainly there was hair. There's hair in any vehicle. They found some blood in one of his vehicles. Ah, it's Kate Rich, they say.
Right.
Nope, wasn't Kate Rich. It was Henry. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's where we were on that. It was pretty crazy. We called it life in the popcorn popper. It was just like pop, 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 pop every day. 5 or 6 or 8 new things we had to answer. 5 or 6 or 8 new attacks. That's when I said to John Ben Sutter, when he said, Vic, they've got us surrounded. I just feel like they've got us surrounded. And I said, good. And we're not going to let any of them get away.
there you go. Well, here's my question. I mean, you're obviously the district attorney. You're here trying to run a DA's office. You have capital murder cases you're trying to get ready for and try. How did you find out about articles like this? Were you just in your office and someone from your office would bring one in and be like, here's another one? I mean, how did you field them? Did you have time to review them? Did you have time to prepare any kind of answers for them?
I was usually, about the time the article hit, and sometimes even before it hit, I'd be getting a phone call. I'd be getting a phone call from Mike Cox wanting a quote. What are you going to say about this, Vic Feazell? I'd be getting a phone call from some other person, or I'd be getting a call from somebody in law enforcement. Guess what? It's about to hit, And also, there's a thing called a clipping service.
Yeah.
They probably don't have that anymore, but it was a service in Texas that subscribed to every newspaper, and they would clip it out and send you the actual article.
It's pretty cool.
with the date on it. And so anytime my name was mentioned in a newspaper article, it got mailed to me. I may not get it for a week or 2 later, but it got mailed to me. So that's part of how I kept up with it. And then the TV stations would get advance notice of stuff like these Mike Cox articles, and they'd be on the phone to me. Right. And I'd be answering one, and then another, and then another. It was just constantly talking to the media and constantly having to detangle this disinformation.
Now, does anybody stand out to you, though, Vic, as being, I wouldn't say on your side, but somebody who's being more open to the facts? We obviously had Hugh, but was there anybody else in the media realm that was helpful to you in actually being like, all right, Vic, I'm going to listen to your side of this story, and printing stuff that was more truthful than what you had with the disinformation campaign? Is there anybody that sticks out in your mind like that was a good reporter back then who was open and honest with what they were reporting?
Well, Hugh Ainsworth and Jim Henderson, because they continued to follow me. They wrote things during the investigation and during my trial. They were with the Times Herald. Mm-hmm. Carlton Stowers, he wasn't a reporter for any certain newspaper, but he wrote freelance, and he had a couple articles published in D Magazine. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, he won an award. He won the Dallas Press Club Award for his article called War in Waco, which was about what I was going through fighting the Rangers and the FBI.
Didn't he give you that award?
He did. It's in our conference room. I need to get some brass polish and polish that thing up. It's real pretty. It's very pretty. It looks like a really good looking lady. She's built like a Barbie doll, standing there holding a plate that has a big D on it for Dallas Press Club. And cool. It's over a foot tall. I mean, it's an impressive award. And Carlton invited me and Bernie up to the Dallas Press Club dinner because he had been nominated. And then when he got the award, And he says, and I want to give this award to Vic Feazell.
Oh, cool, man.
Oh my God. And I said, Carlton, I can't take your award, man. No. He said, no, I want to. And then about a week later, he told me, hey, guess what? They're going to give me another one so I can have one for my house. So I think he had to pay for that second one. But yeah, that's how I got it. And thank you, Carlton Stowers, for writing War in Waco and for giving me that Press Club Award. Cool. And thank you, Carlton Stowers, for writing Careless Whispers, the book on the Lake Waco triple murders. Man, he attended every day of that trial. A lot of times his wife, Pat, was with him helping to take notes so they didn't miss any of it. Wow. So, yeah. So, Hugh, Carlton Stowers, Mike Cox had the Statesman poisoned against us. And so that was about it. Lynn Woolley had already been fired.
And who was writing for the Waco Tribune Herald at that time? Who were some of the writers that were covering it? And were they pretty biased too at the time?
No, they were pretty good. They were balanced. It was Tommy Witherspoon, and Tommy's still with the paper. He's just not as energetic as he used to be, but hell, neither am I. And a guy named Daryl Dunn. Matter of fact, there's this one great photo of me and Maddox, and it's our backs looking out into this audience of reporters with their cameras. And there's some people right on the front row, and one of them is Hugh Ainsworth. And right next to Hugh Ainsworth, or maybe one down, is a young man, and that was Daryl Dunn. So that was Mike Cox newspaper article, Lucas Count of Killings Called Lie by Jail Friend. Lie.
And so were you seeing a lot of articles like this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, matter of fact, here's another one. Mike Cox, the week later.
Look at that young Vic there. Look at that.
Yeah, that's young chubby Vic with his porno star mustache.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm thinking about growing my beard back. I want to know what the listeners think. Well, not the listeners. They can't see it anyway. Our YouTube watchers. Yes. This goes on YouTube as well. And we show these newspaper articles and we show film clips and things like that in our YouTube podcast. Yep. So tell them how to find it, Jonathan.
Go to youtube.com and type in The Vic Feazell Show. And it'll come to our channel. They call it a channel.
And this is episode 59?
59 or 60, yeah.
Wow.
I've had this thing since like July of last year.
Wow.
You're Vic.
We're doing good, man. Hi, I'm Vic Feazell. During these trying times, you might want to just stay home. And at the law offices of Vic Feazell, we understand. That's why we're set up to handle your personal injury claim without you even having to come in. Just give us a call, and we'll take it from there. We can send any paperwork straight to your smartphone or computer. Don't delay, because if we don't put money in your pocket, you don't owe us anything. I'm Vic Feazell.